What happens when country music's laid-back charmer walks onto one of daytime television's most politically charged stages? Blake Shelton's appearance on The View was supposed to be a light-hearted promotion for his new album, but what unfolded became one of the most explosive moments in talk show history. Before we dive into exactly what went down between Blake and Joy Behar that led to security getting involved, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us whose side you're on in this whole situation. Trust me, you're going to have opinions. The morning started off innocent enough. Blake Shelton walked onto The View's set with that signature Oklahoma grin, waving to the audience as they erupted in applause. He was wearing his usual get-up jeans, boots, and a button-down shirt that screamed country casual. The hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Ann, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, all stood to greet him with the kind of enthusiasm reserved for A-list celebrities. Blake took his seat, adjusted his microphone, and settled in for what everyone assumed would be your typical celebrity interview. Talk about the new music, share some funny stories from The Voice, maybe crack a few jokes. Standard stuff. Whoopi opened with a warm welcome. "Blake Shelton, welcome back to The View. It's always a pleasure to have you here." Blake nodded, flashing that easy smile. "Thanks for having me. It's good to be back." The audience clapped again, and you could feel the energy in the room. It was positive, upbeat, exactly what a morning talk show should feel like. Sarah Ann jumped in next, asking about his new album and what inspired the songs. Blake leaned back, completely comfortable, and started talking about his creative process, how he'd been writing more personal material lately. Really digging into his experiences, everything was going smoothly. Too smoothly, because anyone who's watched The View knows that when things start off pleasant, it's only a matter of time before someone steers the conversation somewhere less comfortable. And that someone, as it turned out, was Joy Behar. She'd been sitting there quietly, listening to Blake talk about his music, but you could see it in her expression. She was waiting, calculating, getting ready to pounce. About 10 minutes into the interview, Joy leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Blake, can I ask you something?" Her tone had shifted. It wasn't the friendly banter from before. There was an edge to it now, something sharper. Blake, still relaxed, nodded. "Sure, Joy, shoot." Joy smiled, but it wasn't warm. "You've been pretty quiet about politics over the years. You don't really talk about it much in interviews. Why is that?" The studio went quiet. Not silent, but you could feel the shift. The other hosts glanced at each other, and the audience seemed to hold its breath. Blake's smile didn't fade, but something changed in his eyes. He knew exactly what was happening. "Well, Joy, I don't really think my fans care about my political opinions," he said evenly. "They care about the music. And honestly, I think there's enough division out there without me adding to it." It was a diplomatic answer. Smart, even. But Joy wasn't backing down. "So you're saying you don't have opinions? Or you just don't want to share them?" Blake shifted in his seat slightly. "I'm saying I don't think every single person with a platform needs to use it to tell people how to think. I make music. That's my job. I'm not a politician." Joy let out a small laugh, the kind that's meant to sound light, but comes across as condescending. "But you have influence, Blake. Millions of people listen to you. Don't you think you have a responsibility to speak out on important issues?" Blake's jaw tightened just a fraction. "I think I have a responsibility to be honest and to treat people with respect. Beyond that, I think people are smart enough to form their own opinions without me lecturing them." Whoopi tried to step in, sensing the tension. "Blake, you've always been someone who connects with people from all walks of life. That's what makes your music so universal." Blake nodded gratefully toward Whoopi. "Exactly, and I want to keep it that way. I don't want to alienate half my audience because I decided to get on a soapbox about something they might not agree with." But Joy wasn't letting it go. "So you're more concerned about album sales than standing up for what's right?" The question landed like a slap. Blake's expression hardened. "That's not what I said, Joy, and that's not fair." Joy shrugged. "I'm just trying to understand your perspective. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're avoiding taking a stand because it's easier." Blake sat up straighter, his voice firm but controlled. "No, Joy. What I'm avoiding is assuming that I have all the answers. What I'm avoiding is pretending like my opinion is somehow more valuable than anyone else's just because I'm on TV. What I'm avoiding is contributing to this culture where everyone's screaming at each other instead of actually listening." The audience started murmuring. Some people were nodding along with Blake. Others looked uncomfortable. Joy, however, looked energized. But Blake, there are issues where there's a clear right and wrong. Issues where staying silent is actually taking a side. Blake leaned forward now, matching her energy. And maybe that's true, Joy, but who gets to decide what's right and wrong? You, me, some talking head on a news channel. People have different values, different experiences, different perspectives. And just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't make them a bad person. Joy's voice rose slightly. I never said they were bad people. But if you're not speaking out against injustice, then what are you doing? Blake's patience was starting to wear thin. You could hear it in his tone. I'm making music that brings people together. I'm treating everyone I meet with kindness and respect regardless of their beliefs. I'm trying to be a good person without needing to broadcast it to the world for validation. Is that not enough? Sarah Ann tried to jump in, her voice soothing. I think what Blake is saying is that there are different ways to make a positive impact, and not everyone has to do it the same way. But Joy cut her off. No, Sarah, what Blake is saying is that he's comfortable staying in his lane and not rocking the boat, even when the boat needs to be rocked. Blake's eyes flashed. You don't know anything about me, Joy. You don't know what I believe, what I stand for, or what I do when the cameras aren't rolling. You're sitting here making assumptions about me based on the fact that I won't perform for you like some trained seal. The audience gasped. Whoopi raised her hands. Okay, let's all just take a breath here. But it was too late. The dam had broken. Joy fired back immediately. I'm not asking you to perform, Blake. I'm asking you to use your voice for something meaningful, instead of just singing about trucks and beer. Blake's face flushed red. And there it is. The elitism, the condescension. You think country music is beneath you. You think the people who listen to it are beneath you. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Joy shook her head, but her expression betrayed her. I didn't say that. Blake stood up now, his microphone still clipped to his shirt. You didn't have to say it, Joy. It's written all over your face. You think you're better than me because you sit at this table and talk about politics every day. You think you're smarter, more enlightened, more important. But let me tell you something. The people who listen to my music, the people you're so quick to dismiss, they're the backbone of this country. They work hard, they take care of their families, and they don't need you or anyone else telling them how to live their lives. The audience was split now. Half of them were clapping. The other half sat in stunned silence. Joy stood up too, her voice rising to match his. This isn't about looking down on anyone, Blake. This is about accountability. This is about recognizing that when you have a platform, you have a responsibility. Blake threw his hands up. Responsibility to who? Joy. To you? To whatever agenda you're pushing this week? I don't owe you anything. I don't owe any of you anything. He gestured broadly at the table. Sunny Hostin spoke up for the first time, her voice calm but firm. Blake, no one's saying you owe us anything. But Joy has a point. When you stay silent on certain issues, it can send a message. Blake turned to face Sunny. What message? That I'm not interested in dividing people. That I'd rather focus on what brings us together instead of what tears us apart. If that's the message I'm sending, then good. I'm okay with that, Joy scoffed. That's a cop-out, and you know it. Blake whipped back around to face her. No, Joy. What's a cop-out is sitting behind that table acting like you're some moral authority while you spend every episode tearing people down who don't think exactly like you do. You talk about bringing people together, but all you do is divide. You talk about respect, but you've shown me none today. Joy's face turned a deeper shade of red, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I've shown you no respect. Blake, I invited a conversation. You're the one who's getting defensive because you can't handle being asked a simple question. Blake let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. A simple question? You didn't ask me a question, Joy. You ambushed me. You brought me on here under the pretense of talking about my music, and then you decided to turn it into an interrogation about my political beliefs. Whoopi tried again, her voice firmer this time. Blake, Joy, let's everybody calm down for a second. But neither of them was listening anymore. They were locked in, staring each other down like two fighters in a ring. Joy pointed her finger across the table. You know what your problem is, Blake? You hide behind this aw-shucks country boy persona, but the truth is, you're afraid. You're afraid to take a stand because you don't want to lose your precious fan base. Blake's voice dropped lower, more intense. My precious fan base. Those are real people. Joy. People with families, with struggles, with dreams. They're not just numbers to me. They're not some abstract concept I use to make myself feel important. They're human beings, and I respect them enough not to treat them like they need me to tell them how to think. Joy leaned forward. How noble of you, Blake. Really, what a hero you are, protecting your fans from having to hear an opinion. Blake stepped closer to the table, his voice rising again. You want to talk about opinions, Joy? Fine, here's my opinion. I think you sit up here, in your bubble, surrounded by people who agree with everything you say, and you've lost touch with reality. You've lost touch with what regular people actually care about. You think everyone's sitting at home obsessing over the same things you obsess over, but they're not. They're worried about paying their bills, keeping their jobs, taking care of their kids. They don't have time for your culture war nonsense. The audience erupted in a mix of applause and boos. Some people were standing now, cheering Blake on. Others were shaking their heads in disapproval. Joy's eyes widened, and she slammed her hand on the table. Culture war nonsense. Blake, we're talking about basic human rights. We're talking about justice, equality, fairness. If you think that's nonsense, then maybe you need to take a hard look at yourself. Blake's voice was almost a shout now. Don't you dare lecture me about justice and equality. Don't you dare act like you have the moral high ground here. I treat every single person I meet with the same respect, the same kindness, regardless of who they are or what they believe. Can you say the same? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you only respect people who think exactly like you do. Joy stood up fully now, matching his energy. That is not true, and you know it. Blake shot back immediately. Isn't it? Look at how you're treating me right now, Joy. Look at how you've talked to me this entire interview. You've been condescending, dismissive, and judgmental from the moment I sat down. And why? Because I won't parrot whatever talking points you want me to parrot. Because I won't play along with your little game. Sonny tried to interject. Blake, I don't think that's entirely fair. But Blake cut her off. Fair? You want to talk about fair, Sonny? Is it fair to invite someone onto your show and then attack them for not sharing your worldview? Is it fair to put someone on the spot and demand they take a political stance when they've made it clear they don't want to? Because that's what's happening here. Sarah Ann, looking visibly uncomfortable, spoke up softly. Blake, I think maybe we've gotten off track here. This was supposed to be a fun conversation about your music. Blake turned to her, his expression softening slightly. You're right, Sarah. It was. But Joy couldn't help herself. She had to make it about something else. She had to try to score points. Joy exploded. Score points. This isn't a game to me, Blake. These are issues that affect real people's lives. Blake spun back to face her. And you think they don't affect mine? You think I don't care about people. You think because I don't post about every social issue on Twitter that I'm somehow indifferent? That's the problem with people like you, Joy. You think activism begins and ends with talking. You think if you're not shouting about something online or on TV, then you don't care. But that's garbage. Some of us actually do things quietly. Some of us help people without needing a pat on the back for it. Joy's voice was sharp as a knife. Oh, please, Blake, spare me the false humility. If you were really doing all this charitable work, we'd know about it. Your publicist would make sure of that. Blake's face went dark. You don't know anything about what I do. You don't know about the fundraisers I've played for free. You don't know about the families I've helped behind the scenes. You don't know about the people I've employed, the communities I've supported. And you know why you don't know? Because I don't do it for people like you. I don't do it for applause. I do it because it's the right thing to do. Alyssa Farrah Griffin finally spoke up, her voice measured. Blake, I think what Joy is trying to say, maybe not in the best way, is that public figures have an opportunity to influence positive change. That's not a bad thing. Blake looked at Alyssa, his frustration evident, but his tone slightly less heated. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, Alyssa. I'm saying it's not the only thing. And I'm saying that I'm tired of being judged by people who think their way is the only way. Joy wasn't done. Your way seems to be no way at all, Blake. Your way seems to be sticking your head in the sand and pretending everything's fine. Blake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. My way is treating people with respect. My way is recognizing that not everyone has to agree with me. My way is understanding that the world is complicated and messy, and that I don't have all the answers. If that makes me a coward in your eyes, Joy, I can live with that. But I'm not going to sit here and let you tell me I'm a bad person, because I won't bend the knee to your ideology. Joy's voice rose to match his. Nobody's asking you to bend the knee, Blake. We're asking you to stand for something. Anything, Blake shouted back. I stand for plenty, Joy. I just don't stand for the same things you do. And you can't handle it. That's what this is really about. You can't stand the fact that someone exists in this world who doesn't worship at your altar. Whoopi stood up now, her voice booming across the studio. All right, that's enough. Both of you need to stop right now. But Blake and Joy were in their own world, completely consumed by the argument. Joy pointed at Blake, her voice shaking with anger. You are exactly what's wrong with this country. Blake, people like you, who sit back and do nothing while the world burns around them. People who care more about being comfortable than being right. Blake stepped even closer to the table, his voice a roar. And you're what's wrong with this country. Joy, people like you who are so convinced of your own righteousness that you can't see past your own nose. People who divide and vilify and destroy anyone who doesn't fall in line. You want to talk about the world burning? Look in the mirror. You're holding the match. The studio audience was in complete chaos now. People were shouting at each other, some defending Blake, others defending Joy. Security personnel started moving toward the stage area. Sensing that things were about to spiral even further out of control, Sunny stood up, trying to restore order. Everyone, please. Let's all just take a moment. But her voice was drowned out by the noise. Joy, her face flushed and her hands trembling, shouted over the chaos. You need to leave, Blake. Get off my stage. Blake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your stage. This isn't your stage, Joy. This is a set. This is a job. And you're not the queen? No matter how much you act like it. Joy turned to someone off camera, presumably a producer. Get him out of here. I want him removed. Now, Blake ripped the microphone off his shirt and threw it on the table. Don't worry, Joy. I'm leaving. I wouldn't stay on this show for another second if you paid me. This whole thing is a joke. You're a joke. Joy's voice was venomous. Get out. Get out now before I have you thrown out. Blake started walking toward the exit, but he turned back one more time. You know what the saddest part is? Joy. You actually think you're making a difference. You actually think all your yelling and screaming and finger-pointing is changing the world. But it's not. All you're doing is making people angrier, more divided, more hateful. Congratulations. That's your legacy. Joy's entire body was rigid, her voice shaking as she shouted after him. My legacy is standing up for what's right, Blake. What's yours? A bunch of songs about drinking and tractors. Real, meaningful contribution to society. Blake stopped in his tracks, turning around slowly. The security guards who had been approaching froze, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out. Blake's voice was dangerously quiet now, which somehow felt more intense than the shouting. You really can't help yourself, can you, Joy? You just have to get that last dig in. You just have to prove you're superior. Joy crossed her arms, her chin raised defiantly. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm stating facts. Blake took a few steps back toward the table, and you could see the security team tense up. Facts? You wouldn't know a fact if it hit you in the face. All you know is your own opinion, and you've convinced yourself that your opinion is the same as truth. That's not facts, Joy. That's arrogance. Whoopi moved between them, her hands raised. Blake, I think it's time for you to go. This has gone too far. Blake looked at Whoopi, and for a moment his expression softened. You're right, Whoopi. It has gone too far. But I want everyone watching to understand something. I came here in good faith. I came here to talk about my music, to have a conversation, to maybe make people smile for a few minutes. But that wasn't good enough for Joy. She had to turn it into something ugly. She had to make it about politics and division and judgment. And that's on her, not me. Joy stepped around Whoopi, refusing to be silenced. You're rewriting history, Blake. You're the one who got defensive the second I asked you a question. You're the one who started attacking me. Blake's eyes flashed. I got defensive. Joy, you implied I was greedy, that I was a coward, that I didn't care about people. You sat there with that smug look on your face and tried to make me look like some kind of villain because I won't pledge allegiance to your political party. Yeah, I got defensive. Anyone would. Sunny stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. Blake, I understand you're upset. But Joy wasn't trying to make you a villain. She was trying to have a dialogue about responsibility and influence. Blake turned to Sonny, his frustration evident. A dialogue requires two people listening to each other. Sonny, what Joy was doing wasn't dialogue. It was prosecution. She had already decided what she thought about me before I even opened my mouth, and nothing I said was going to change her mind. Joy threw her hands up. Because you didn't say anything, Blake. That's the problem. You spoke in circles. You deflected. You hid behind this whole "I'm just a simple country singer" act. You never actually took a position on anything. Blake's voice rose again. Because it's none of your business what my positions are. Joy, it's none of your business what I believe about politics or social issues or anything else. I don't owe you an explanation. I don't owe you a confession. I don't owe you anything. The audience was still in chaos, with producers now moving through the crowd trying to calm people down. Camera operators kept filming. Sarah N. looked like she wanted to disappear, while Alyssa sat frozen, clearly out of her depth in this situation. Joy's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You owe the truth, Blake. That's what you owe. And the truth is, you're too scared to stand for anything because it might hurt your bottom line. Blake walked right up to the table now, leaning over it to look Joy directly in the eyes. The security guards moved in closer, ready to pull him back if necessary. You want the truth, Joy? Here's the truth. I think both political parties are corrupt. I think both sides lie and manipulate and use people for their own gain. I think the media, including this show, profits off of keeping people angry and afraid. I think most politicians don't give a damn about regular people. They only care about power. And I think people like you, who act like they have all the answers, are part of the problem, not the solution. Is that truth enough for you? The studio went dead silent for a moment. Even Joy seemed momentarily stunned. But she recovered quickly, her voice icy. So you're one of those enlightened centrists who thinks being above it all makes you smart. How original. Blake straightened up, shaking his head. No, Joy, I'm someone who thinks for himself. I'm someone who refuses to be put in a box by people like you. I'm someone who understands that life is more complicated than your black and white US versus them mentality. Joy laughed bitterly. Life is complicated, Blake, but some things aren't. Some things really are black and white, and your refusal to acknowledge that is exactly why we're in the mess we're in. Blake's voice was steel. We're in the mess we're in because people like you have made it impossible to have a civil conversation. Because you've turned everything into a war. Because you've made it so that if someone doesn't agree with you 100%, they're the enemy. That's why we're in this mess. Joy, look in the mirror. Whoopi's voice boomed out again. All right, we need to go to commercial. Right now, Blake, you need to leave the building. But Blake wasn't moving yet. I'll leave, Whoopi. But first, I want to say something to the people watching at home. Don't let people like Joy make you feel bad for thinking differently. Don't let them bully you into silence. Don't let them convince you that you're a bad person because you won't conform. You're allowed to have your own thoughts, your own beliefs, your own values. And you don't need permission from anyone to live your life the way you see fit. Joy's voice was dripping with contempt. What a beautiful speech, Blake. Really touching. Now get off my show. Blake picked up his microphone from the table, looked at it for a moment, then set it back down gently. I already told you, Joy, it's not your show. It's a show you happen to be on. But I'll leave because I have better things to do with my time than argue with someone who's incapable of seeing past their own ego. As Blake started to walk away for real this time, Joy called after him one more time. You're a coward, Blake Shelton. A coward hiding behind false humility and fake niceness. Blake stopped, his back to her, and for a moment it looked like he might turn around again. But instead, he just shook his head and kept walking. Goodbye, Joy. I hope someday you figure out that the world doesn't revolve around you. The security guards escorted Blake toward the exit, though he wasn't resisting. He walked with his head held high, not looking back. Behind him, Joy was still standing at the table, her chest heaving, her face red. Whoopi was trying to signal for a commercial break, while Sonny and Sarah sat in shocked silence. Alyssa looked like she might cry. The audience was a mixture of reactions. Some people were cheering for Blake as he left. Others were shouting support for Joy, and some were just sitting there in stunned disbelief at what they'd witnessed. As Blake reached the studio door, he paused and looked back one final time, not at Joy, but at the audience. He gave them a small nod, almost like an acknowledgement of shared understanding, and then he was gone. The door closed behind him, and the studio erupted in noise again. Joy sat down heavily in her chair, her hands shaking slightly. Whoopi leaned over to say something to her, but Joy just waved her off. Staring straight ahead at the cameras, the producers were scrambling, trying to figure out how to proceed. This wasn't something you could just smooth over with a commercial break. This was going to be everywhere within the hour, clipped and shared and debated across every social media platform. Everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something that would define the show for weeks, maybe months to come. Sunny finally broke the silence at the table, her voice barely above a whisper. Well, that escalated quickly. Sarah let out a nervous laugh that died almost immediately. I don't even know what to say. Alyssa just shook her head, still processing everything that had happened, and Joy sat there with her jaw clenched, clearly trying to compose herself but failing to hide the anger still coursing through her. Whoopi looked directly into the camera. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. But everyone knew there was no coming back from what had just happened. The damage was done in the hallway outside the studio. Blake was pulling off the security credentials they'd given him when he arrived. One of the security guards, an older man who'd been working at the show for years, looked at him with something like sympathy. That was rough in there, Mr. Shelton. Blake let out a long breath, running his hand through his hair. Yeah, it was, but it needed to be said. All of it needed to be said. The guard nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think a lot of people are going to agree with you. Blake managed a small smile. And a lot of people are going to think I'm the worst person in the world. That's just how it goes. He started walking toward the exit of the building, his boots echoing on the tile floor. Behind him, he could still hear the muffled chaos of the studio. The audience noise, the voices of the hosts, all of it blending into a distant roar. He pushed open the door to the outside and was immediately hit with fresh air and sunlight. He stood there for a moment, just breathing, letting the tension drain out of his shoulders. So what do you think? Was Blake right to stand his ground and call out what he saw as hypocrisy and bullying? Or did he overreact to what was just a tough but fair line of questioning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you hit that subscribe button.